Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Aditya Gupta. The next topic in the NCERT based human physiology. First of all, I'm sorry that I initially did cover respiratory system a bit, but then stopped it. But apart from that, let's begin. So the topic this time is the exchange of gases, and I believe it is the easiest topic as far as respiratory physiology is concerned. Now, why do I believe that? Because the concept is very simple. What has to happen is that oxygen has to go inside the body, oxygen has to come, carbon dioxide has to come outside the body, and everything is going to happen because of a pressure gradient. Nothing is going to move from a low pressure to high pressure gradient. Every movement will occur from a high pressure gradient to low pressure gradient with the help of diffusion, because we know that diffusion obviously occurs from an area of high concentration or high partial pressure to an area of low concentration, that is low partial pressure, and everything will be in this manner only. Okay, so let's assume when we are inhaling the air that we have, what is the concentration of oxygen in that air? It is 21%, right? And nitrogen is 78%, and carbon dioxide is like 0.3%. Fair enough? Agreed. So when this air, by the time it reaches the alveoli, it will have more oxygen. You will understand that, I guess. Yeah, it will have more oxygen, and carbon dioxide will be less. Fair point. And the blood, that is the deoxygenated blood from the systems, from the systemic veins, that has reached the right side of the heart and then through pulmonary artery has finally reached the heart, that will have less oxygen and more carbon dioxide. Make sense? Right? So that simple exchange will be dependent on the pressure. In the alveoli, the partial pressure of oxygen is 104 millimeter of mercury, and the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the alveoli is 40. Okay, while the partial pressure of oxygen in the deoxygenated blood, it's still 40. It's not like it's 0, it's 40. Okay, while the carbon dioxide partial pressure is 45. Now the exchange will simply take place from high to low. So the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the alveoli, as we can see in the alveoli में कितना है 40. The one that is present in the pulmonary artery or the veins is 45. Where it is higher? It is higher in the pulmonary artery and veins. And where it is lower? It's in the alveoli, it's lower. So the carbon dioxide will move out of, what will it do? It will move out of that 45, some amount will move out of the pulmonary artery or the basically the systemic circulation. It will move out of the pulmonary artery into the alveoli. Alveoli is full of oxygen. It has 104 partial pressure, while the pulmonary artery that is bringing the deoxygenated blood has just 40 partial pressure. So oxygen will move from the alveoli, and that's what you want. Oxygen will move from the alveoli into the pulmonary artery from a gradient of 104 to 40. And finally, the blood that comes through pulmonary veins go to the left side of the heart and into the arteries. That will have PO2 as 95. The partial pressure of oxygen will be 95 millimeters of mercury, while PCO2 in the pulmonary artery or the deoxygenated was 45. Now that has some amount of diffusion has gone into alveoli that we exhale. The exhaled air has carbon dioxide, and this 45 has decreased down to 40. So PCO2 in the blood in the arteries or your pulmonary veins, even your pulmonary vein, which is bringing it to the left side of the heart, this will have a PO2 of 95 and a PCO2 of 40. This will go where? This will go to the tissues. And what are tissues doing? Tissues are utilizing oxygen to do glycolysis, to do Krebs cycle, to make their energy in the form of ATP. And in this process, they're producing a lot of carbon dioxide. So as far as the tissue milieu is concerned, it will again have lower amount of oxygen and a higher amount of carbon dioxide. And what will this do? This again will facilitate a transfusion from arteries. These arteries will have higher oxygen concentration, tissue will have lower oxygen concentration. And this will facilitate that the artery ka jo oxygen hai, the oxygen that is present in the artery at 95 mm Hg partial pressure will move into the tissues, and tissues will again utilize it. And the carbon dioxide that they have generated, that has resulted in a partial pressure of 45, will then move out. Where it will move out? It will move out into the arteries, and by the time it comes into the vein, the PCO2 again will rise to 45 and PO2 will decrease to 40. Right? And this veins will go to the right side of the heart. From there it will go to the pulmonary artery. From pulmonary artery, again this entire process will start again. The alveoli will move oxygen inside, carbon dioxide will go out. This will go to the tissue. Oxygen will go into the tissue, carbon dioxide will move out, and from here carbon dioxide will move out into the alveoli outside through our expiration, again in the alveoli, and this process will keep on repeating. Now let's read what NCERT gives. So NCERT says that the primary sites of exchange of gases is alveoli. Yeah, we know that alveoli, they're the thinnest, right? They're the thinnest. They're made up of a single cell thick, so that the diffusion is easy. Diffusion cannot occur across a thick membrane. Your skin cannot diffuse. The thin thing can diffuse. So alveoli, obviously, because they are thin, are the primary site of exchange of gases. So they can easily ask a question: which of the following are the primary site of exchange of gases? Alveoli, bronchiole, bronchi, trachea. Alveoli, because they're the thinnest, and they're finally, when they're terminating the bronchioles are keep on dividing and branching, they finally terminate into they finally terminate into alveoli. We learned this in the last video. The exchange of gases also occurs between the blood and the tissues. Okay. The oxygen and the carbon dioxide are exchanged in these by simple diffusion. By what? Simple diffusion. So they can ask you, the exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen occurs with the help of passive diffusion, that is simple diffusion. Active diffusion, no. Active transport, no. And they can give you a random fourth option. So how does this transfusion, exchange occurs? Simple diffusion would be the answer. You should always remember that simple diffusion would be the answer as far as exchange of gases is concerned. Based on what? Based on pressure and concentration. Solubility of these gases as well as the thickness of the membranes are involved in diffusion are also some of the important factors that can affect the rate of diffusion. Obviously, if you want to diffuse something from here to here, the other thing that will matter is the solubility in this particular part. If it has more solubility, then more thing can diffuse. And if the thickness is less, then you can diffuse it. Diffusion will be easier. If thickness is more, diffusion will become tougher. I think this is all we all know simply. So the two things that can affect this simple diffusion is, one is solubility and the second is thickness. So again, they can ask you which of the following does not affect diffusion. One, pressure gradient obviously affects. More the pressure gradient, more the diffusion. Second, thickness obviously affects. Third, solubility affects. They can give you a random fourth option and that will be the correct answer. They'll ask you which of the following is incorrect and they'll give you these three options and give a random fourth option. And that's how questions are framed from NCERT. See, my point of making you read NCERT is not because I want you to understand the concept. I have already told you the concept. The reason I'm reading NCERT with you is to make sure how questions can be framed. So every time you see something which has 3 or 4 options related to it, always think of it as a potential question. So they have given it solubility of gases and thickness of the membrane and depending upon pressure and concentration. So 1, 2 and 3 things, and MCQs are the 4 options. So any random fourth option will be they'll ask which of the following is incorrect and that will become the fourth option. Random fourth option will become the correct answer in that particular question. Okay. So the diffusion is affected by first pressure gradient, second solubility of gases, and third thickness of membranes. These are the factors that affect the rate of diffusion. Okay. Now pressures contributed by individual gas is the partial pressure. This is a chemistry concept. We all know this. And partial pressures at this different site is different, and that is given in this particular diagram. Okay. Now let's in the diagram and in this table. So let's look at alveoli. Oxygen will be high, obviously 104. CO2 will be low, obviously 40. This has to exchange with deoxygenated blood. So obviously from 104 to 40 oxygen will go, and from the deoxygenated blood carbon dioxide will also move to alveoli. From 45 it will move to 40. Okay. So at the level of alveoli, oxygen is going from alveoli to the blood, and from the blood CO2 is moving out to the alveoli to be thrown out of during the expiration part. Okay. Now this deoxygenated blood, when it has taken all the oxygen, will become what? Oxygenated blood. And its PO2 will rise from 40 to 95. CO2 has been thrown out into the alveoli. So PCO2 will decrease from 45 to 40. This 40 from deoxygenated into oxygenated will become 95. And this 45 will become 40. This oxygenated blood will go where? It will go to tissues. And in tissues, PO2 is less because they are utilizing oxygen. Again, because they are utilizing oxygen, they will be able to take up oxygen from the oxygenated blood. And from 95 to 40, this diffusion will occur. And again, as far as carbon dioxide is concerned, carbon dioxide that is being generated at the tissue level will move into the blood and make it deoxygenated blood, which has higher amount of carbon dioxide and lower amount of oxygen. This will again go to alveoli and the entire processes will repeat. Okay, now let's read what's given in NCERT. The data given in the table clearly indicates a concentration gradient of oxygen from alveoli to blood and then from blood to tissues. So पहले alveoli and blood के बीच में, because blood जो आता है, that is a deoxygenated blood. So from alveoli, oxygen will move to the deoxygenated blood, make it oxygenated. This oxygenated blood, when through arteries, when it goes to tissues, will come down to the tissues. Again will become deoxygenated and come back to alveoli. Okay. Similarly, there is a gradient that is present for CO2 in opposite direction. From tissues, it will go to blood. From blood, it will go to alveoli. And from alveoli, it will be thrown out during our expiration, right? The solubility of CO2 is 20 to 25 times higher than that of oxygen. Okay? Remember this. They have asked this multiple times as a single liner. The solubility of carbon dioxide is 10x as compared to oxygen, 20x as compared to oxygen, 30x as compared to oxygen, and 40x as compared to oxygen. This 20x is a very important point. This is asked even in, let me tell you, this is asked even in postgraduate entrance examination, that solubility of carbon dioxide is 20 times more than that of oxygen. This is asked even during our postgraduate entrance examination. And what happens is, if the solubility is more, now, if I'm going to transfer from here to another part, from A to B, if I'm going to transfer, and in B the solubility is more, even for a smaller amount of partial pressure difference, the amount that can be transferred, because you are more soluble in the other medium, the amount that can be transferred will become more. And that is what is the next line is. That the diffusion per unit difference in partial pressure. If we take two similar gases and the difference in partial pressure is similar, 5 and 5, the gas which is more soluble will be able to go more. That is what is said. That for the same difference in partial pressure, the amount that can diffuse will be much higher as compared to oxygen. Because if there is a 5 mm partial pressure difference between carbon dioxide at two levels and 5 mm partial pressure at two levels between oxygen, then carbon dioxide will diffuse much more. Because carbon dioxide is much more soluble. Because it is much more soluble, it won't rise the partial pressure that much. Since it won't rise the partial pressure that much, it will still keep on driving the diffusion process. That's why solubility becomes important. If in the blood something is soluble, it won't drive the partial pressure. Partial pressure is only because of the insoluble form, if you remember from chemistry. And the insoluble form will drive the partial pressure up. If it will drive the partial pressure up, there won't be any gradient. But if it's soluble, the partial pressure will keep on staying down and will keep on driving the diffusion. And that's why, because of the higher solubility of carbon dioxide, for the same partial pressure difference, more amount of carbon dioxide can be diffused. Because it will get dissolved in blood, it won't drive up the partial pressure, and it won't drive up the partial pressure, the diffusion gradient will keep on staying the same. Now they talk about the diffusion membrane. What is the diffusion membrane? This diffusion membrane is made up of 3 layers. What are these 3 layers? First is the alveolar lining. Okay, this is made up of what? Squamous epithelium, single cell thick. The thin squamous epithelium of alveoli. Okay. Then another single cell thick endothelium. Endothelium of the blood capillary. Again single cell thick. Endothelium of the blood capillaries. Along with both of their basement membranes. And the basement substance. Composed of thin basement membrane supporting the squamous epithelium and the basement membrane surrounding the endothelial cells of capillaries. So both the endothelial cells of capillaries and the alveoli, both will have a basement membrane. These two will combine together to form the basement substance. Okay. So these are the 3 layers that are involved in diffusion. What are they? First is a single thin lining of alveoli, then the basement substance, and then the single thin lining of the endothelium. Okay. And together, because they are single cell thick, it's very thin and it allows passive diffusion. Its total thickness is less than a millimeter. Its thickness is less than a millimeter. They can again ask you in a single liner. The thickness of endothelium, basement membrane and squamous epithelium of alveoli combined together is less than 1 mm, less than 10 mm, less than 20 mm, less than 100 mm. Answer will be less than 1 mm. Okay, therefore all these factors favor in our body diffusion of oxygen from alveoli to tissue and from carbon dioxide from tissue to alveoli. We have already discussed this. Okay, and this is again given in the form of diagrammatic representation in this. Alveoli has PO2 of 104, PCO2 of 40. Obviously, because PO2 is high, PCO2 is low, from the pulmonary artery, CO2 will go to the alveoli, oxygen will come into the pulmonary vein, they will get oxygenated. Then in the artery, the PO2 will be 95, PCO2 will be 40. At the level of tissue, the exchange will occur, and the deoxygenated blood again will have PO2 of 40 and PCO2 of 45. So they can ask this diagram also. They can ask you in the form of questions as well. Okay. Simple concept that you have to remember is that oxygen alveoli high, deoxygenated blood low, it flows, then it becomes oxygenated blood. At tissue again oxygen is low. From the oxygenated blood, the tissues will also get oxygen. And then as far as CO2 is concerned, tissue will have high CO2, oxygenated blood will have low CO2. Then tissue will diffuse out the CO2 to the oxygenated blood. So it will become deoxygenated, will have high CO2. This high CO2 deoxygenated blood will go to alveoli. Alveoli has low CO2. And this high CO2 from the deoxygenated blood will move into the alveoli throughout the expired air. Hopefully you have understood the concept. It's not that tricky, frankly. And I'll keep on continuing this series. Thank you and have a nice day.